Good morning, viewers. This is the Visionary Leaders Mind podcast. It gives us an opportunity to talk with guests. I guess my guest today is Ken Dunham. And what we do here on this podcast is we explore the idea of what a visionary leader actually is, how it works, and what it feels like, and how to develop that capability further in yourself. So with that, Ken, thank you for being here.
You bet. Thanks, Brad. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk about leadership and vision. It's actually a pretty difficult subject, so I'm glad that's the focus for today.
Good. Well, tell us about yourself, kind of where you are, how you got there, and what you do.
Well, I have an unusual background. I am about 30 years in on my career, and it all started when I got a virus on a disk back in college. But prior to that, I had had a teacher get me excited about computers. And so I've always been focused on wanting to work in the digital realm. And I've had a varied career. When I was young, I wanted to make my parents proud of me. So I went to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I became a teacher. And I loved educating and working with people. And I still do that today in my consulting and in my executive leadership roles. But over my career, I've had a very unusual set of things where, like, I set up the training programs for pilots and navigators of the U-2 Predator and Warthog system, started the Predator program out there at Indian Springs. And then I was able to work my way into full-time security. I'd done some things that were innovative along the ways around putting a person behind the internet. That was kind of unusual for the Alta Vista Yahoo people in the room. And then around the turn of the century, we started to do cyber threat intelligence, all the way to what we have today, which is chaos, really. When we look at the amount of technology, the rate of change, and the way people use it, we are herding cats globally. So it's never been more challenging than now, I think.
Good. So what's the name of your company?
I currently work as a W-2 employee for a company called Worldwide Technology. We're an essential provider for the majority of Fortune 100 organizations, and we do global support for everything from supply chain to re-architecting your network to security services and digital transformation.
Okay, good. And we'll put how to connect with you and your company in the notes down below. Thank you. So if I were to ask you, well, let me just get straight into it. What's your concept of or definition of a visionary leader? And who do you admire in that realm?
Yeah, I've had a lot of individuals that I think over the years have really contributed to that. I think that it's hard to pick one,
No, okay.
but I know, like,
throw a couple. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, Amit Iran is one who comes to mind with what he did in his role politically as the first cyber czar for a president, and what he's been able to do in the commercial realm in the world of security. I think he's been very impressive in his ability to execute and know how to do business and how to have a vision. I mean, let's look at Steve Jobs, right? Interesting
yes.
career with Apple, right? And how do you have a vision to transform and do things way different outside the box? And it was very proprietary. There are just a large number of individuals that I think of, even today, like Elon Musk, right? He's in headline everything with, changing the way we do business and the way we think, and the infrastructure of communications with 5G, individuals like that. There's just countless individuals that I think have really contributed to massive visionary change. In visionary change, what I often see is people that have a vision for a small thing, rather than the larger ones I just mentioned, but they have a vision for, let's do X, Y, Z, and then they can go to market on it, but then they're not that great at running the business, or they don't know how to get past that innovation stage into scaling into a global solution or product. And so they often get bought out or go to the wayside just due to some challenges. So it's hard to be a visionary and then be really great at seeing a business all the way through.
Well, there's a book called Rocket Fuel that I kind of covers that, and they say they had two terms. They used the visionary leader, but they also had the integrator. And it takes someone I've known for years. It takes someone in operations to take the idea and make it happen. Well,
right.
that's the other half of the world, right? Actually, it's most of the world. Everybody's in the tactics operational piece. And what we need is the combination. Actually, it's a communication process between two parts of the mind. You've got the analytical mind, which is the subtraction, dissection engine that takes pieces and maps out the edges of them and says, okay, here's this piece here, right? We'll say my hand on the desk, right? There's my hand, map out the edge of it. That's the hand, that's the desk, and that's the differentiation between the two. That's the analytical mind function. It's built for that. The problem is, because it's built like that, it thinks it's the only mind, and it's not. Behind that, and kind of wrapped around it, is the intuitive mind, which is a concept engine. And the concept engine is, it will take, and a synthesis engine. So it'll take a problem posed by the analytical mind and said, okay, here's the problem, and here's a piece over here, and one from when you were 4 years old, and one that you had in a dream last night, and we're going to put those all together, and something you read 7 years ago, we're going to shove them all together, and that's the solution. The thing is, when it shows up, it either shows up as an understanding, which you know directly is true, or an epiphany. So if we were to describe those, and those two parts of the mind really have to learn how to work together. So what you're describing is the dysfunction of communication between the visionary intuitive mind and those people who have that stronger, and the people with the analytical mind that do the nuts and bolts, get things done stuff. If you were to describe the difference between an epiphany and intuition, how would you describe that?
Well, for me, an epiphany is it's like a light bulb moment. And I've worked on really difficult, complex problems, or I've been in a tough circumstance, and then all of a sudden something just comes to me. And that for me is an epiphany. I can work towards something like fly fishing and tie the fly, go out, read the water, catch the fish, but that's not an epiphany. That's just fun and relaxing. An epiphany is truly a light bulb moment. It came on, and all of a sudden the dots connected. Now what's happening for me, I wrote my thesis, I don't know if you know this or not, an alternative assessment of multiple intelligences. And for me, it's
Ken, slow that down and say it so that we can understand it again.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Again. Yeah. So I don't know if you know this about me and my background, but in my master's, I wrote an alternative assessment of multiple intelligences. So the understanding of how, like in a Bloom's taxonomy methodology, where we go from being able to have knowledge and understanding and work your way up to the higher levels of thinking, the ability to do synthesis and evaluative thought is a developmental process, generally speaking, provided that you have certain kinds of critical thinking and things that are happening between the left and the right brain. And what you'll find is that when you have an epiphany, things just kind of happen. Like all of a sudden, everything just comes together. And it wasn't something that you were really studying and development. It's just, it might be something you've been working on for a long time. It could be a complex problem, but it is truly a light bulb moment, or it's one that defined a pivotal point in a problem or a challenge that you were overcoming. So I think that's how I view that. And intuition for me is more of that sixth sense. It's something that I pick up on. I've always had it, but when I was young, I didn't listen to it. And the older I get, I listen to it.
Yeah. Well, that's because we learn one brick wall at a time, or we right, or we learn from whispers. And until we
I've had a lot of bricks thrown at me, so I've been able to make a lot of walls, because nobody likes an agent of change. Just newsflash, visionaries out there, put your vest on.
Yeah, right. Well, be patient and willing to teach. Right?
Yeah. Well, bricks are being thrown at you. This is true. Yes.
Right. So that just wakes us up. So once we get to a place where we're awake, then we can learn from the whispers, if you would. I'd much rather learn from the whispers. That time between when you're completely unconscious and asleep and when you're, not ready to move yet, but you're conscious physically, I call that the whisper time. Or those kind of calm moments, like in the shower when the things do pop in. I was like, oh, there's the solution to that, right? So
that's not my 8 to 5, I'll tell you that much.
No, No, it's
very
not.
different pace and all of that. But it is a time where the mind has a chance to settle into itself, and that is when it emerges. I remember when I was young and I was solving really complex, difficult challenges, and usually I solved it in my sleep or when I first woke up in the moment, in those whispering moments.
No, there's a difference in brainwave level at that. You realize that, don't you?
Right.
Analytical mind runs in the beta, and I've said this repeatedly. The intuition shows up at the top end, at least the surface of the intuition shows up in the alpha brainwave level. The theta is where we are when we're asleep and right after we hit consciousness. So if we hit consciousness, we're in that theta brainwave level, both synchronous across the brain. It's in that state. We have access to that deeper mind. So with some hard work, we can get to the place. I'm of the opinion that the mystics, all the guys that have led us, and the women that have led us, with all the religions, if you would, operated after years and years of meditation, maybe longer. They operated in the theta and the delta brainwave level. And so they had access to things we don't have most of the time, but they had a vision for the world. So those are the ultimate. That, and I think the guys that built the United States concept, George Washington, Madison, Jefferson, the first leaders there, Hamilton, those are the people they ran. They must have. There were things that they did that brought that out in them because they were visionary, and it's still running on that vision with modifications, of course, but at that vision 200 years later. How many strategic plans have you ever heard that lasted 200 years?
None that I can remember, really.
None.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, a visionary leader is someone who can with the intuition, see deeper and further and kind of taller, if you would, a bigger volume into the future than most people can. So there we are. Good. So if we were to take those best moments and shove them all together, how does that lead you forward in your life, your business?
Best moments like in my life or that we see in
how about both? Let's just take both, right? Let's take our best people, our most visionary leaders, right? How does that lead us forward into the future? Because that's how we go from where we are right now to improvements, if you would. Those are the improvements.
I would say take a look at Elon Musk and what he does today. Very vocal. Right. He's out there constantly communicating, and he's planting a vision. And it's not just way out there, separated and removed. It's something that people can see as real. They can believe in it. He can paint the path so they can see how they can get there. Even if there's a massive level of effort to get to that final stage, that's critical in leading others and helping them to get on board with that vision and make that vision a reality. And people have to believe in it. So he's able to do that. Persuasiveness, his ability to partner and bring in other individuals who are also leaders. There's an important community and communication element that takes place in being effective at being a visionary in that regards to the community.
I like that. Well, I'm out of questions. Like, leadership. So if you take, now let's add a couple more. If you take the operational side and the vision side and put them together, how many people, I think maybe 5% of the population of leaders have both. That communication between the two, how do you get those visionary things into place and move them forward and that communication set up? In other words, how do we improve this world so that we can have more visionary leaders and affect, to me, it doesn't matter what the vision is. If it's not effectively put into place, it's a dream.
Right. And, I see that all the time. I think that's actually a great question is how do you really make that visionary effective in the world of leadership and leading and change? I see a lot of people that have big dreams and they complain a lot and they don't execute at all. And they're not good at establishing what they need to move forward. A visionary really needs leadership. Most visionaries are not great at leadership in some capacity, and they need someone around them to augment them. But more importantly, even if they had the ability to do all of it, and they were that Renaissance man of visionary, leader, etc., they're still going to need help, because it is about a village getting there. It's not a one-man band. So in order to do it, like you mentioned with our forefathers of the United States of America, it wasn't just George Washington. It was a large number of individuals who came together. They had to have a sense of community, common direction, and focus, extreme focus. And that's what I see in today's world, is that we have very much an ADHD, don't pay attention, look at your phone. People can't even look at each other for 20 minutes while they're having dinner together. And we're losing the ability to stay focused and to be connected. And this is the irony of 2022. We're more connected than we've ever been, and we feel more disconnected than ever. And I think what we're headed into now is a new challenge for innovation and leaders and visionary, because we're going to be working with a large number of people who are depressed. They have high anxiety. Wow. They don't know how to actually partner and communicate and socialize well with each other. They're going to be awkward through remote things. They're going to want to do short little tweets or whatever. And the ability to have deeper levels of trust and intimacy are going to erode. And when that erodes, your ability to be a leader erodes. And then your ability to implement vision erodes. So how do you maintain trust and leadership and vision? All that has to come together, and you have to establish a community and a culture that is connected.
So then you bring up the topic of character, which is what you just described. Thank you. That's one of the best articulations I've ever run into. Thank you, Ken.
Oh, thank you.
I have on my website access to what I call my values list and character trait list. I can't remember which it's titled. I'll have to go look. But what that is a list of what are the possibilities for, I ran into this like the third year in my coaching practice. And I've modified it immensely. But if you were going to pick, let's say 10 characteristics, let's say make it short, make it 5 characteristics, character traits for a visionary leader, what would you have them do? And I'll be blunt and straightforward and pick the top one: integrity.
Well, it's funny you'd pick that, because that's at the top of my list. I would say, and integrity for me is make your yes a yes and your no a no, and you make the hard decisions. I would also define that as doing what is right instead of what is popular. That's critical. But you don't want to be the bull in the china shop too much. There's a balance in how you manage that. So in order to be effective, go ahead.
You're describing strength in addition to integrity. To me,
okay. Yeah. Strength is certainly an element as well. I don't have your list in front of me, so I don't know your terms and definitions there, but
yeah. All right. Where's my list? My list. I have a list here. I have 33 things listed out on my wall, right? So the very first one on my list is presence. You have to be conscious and aware in that moment and be present to act in order to actually do that. You know how you drive down the road and realize, oh, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
So that takes presence to be able to make things actually happen at the moment. As someone said yesterday in a discussion I had, it's like we only have the present moment. Everything else behind us and in front of us are either memory or imagination.
Right.
So presence is the first one. The second one then, in my mind, is truth, but that's, give me a second, I'll just grab the sucker and hold it down here. The second one on my list is capital T truth, which I'm in pursuit of, which is absolute truth. What's actually there, right? As a chemist, you're looking for what actually happens in the beaker. That's my background. So it's like, what's the truth of what's actually happening? The third one is vigilance, which means it's conscious, active awareness. The fourth one I have is decisiveness. And the fifth one to me is integrity. And all of those, all five of those work together. Integrity to me, my definition is internal. What I believe, what I think, what I say, and what I do have to be in alignment. And my work for integrity is to make sure that I'm working to be in alignment in those thought processes and beliefs. Because otherwise, then I can be authentic, right? So that's my sixth list thing. Then excellence. So those are the top kind of few, but it takes strength to be able to do that. It takes presence to be able to do that.
True.
Awareness, decisiveness, internal alignment. We can live two ways. We can live from the outside in, which means we can get to be a victim then, because people can be mean to us, right? And we care. Or we can live from the inside out. And then if people are mean to us, at least we're in alignment with ourselves, and we don't have to care what their opinion is. There's a book by Terry Cole Whitaker called "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business," which I like.
That's interesting. Well, I would add to that list two more things. I would say that a visionary leader needs to be committed. You're not going to achieve it overnight, and it's going to be a long ride. And in order to see it through, you're going to have to go through a significant amount of level of effort and perseverance and challenges and overcoming and not giving up, especially if you've been doing startups or really challenging, never been done before kinds of things. Been there, done that. And I could have gave up lots along the ways, and plenty of people did. I didn't. And quitters never win. So you got to see it through, and you have to be committed to it, which kind of goes back to what you said around integrity. Because if I don't believe in it and I'm not totally aligned and all in on it, I'm not going to see it through. And of course, that leads to nowhere. Even if it was the best vision in the world, you're not going to be the one that's known for it or the one that actually implements it into reality. The other element I'd add is thinking strategically. People don't ask why. I was on a call recently where I had a team member who had an amazing plan on how to go solve this problem. And I'm like, but why do they think this problem needs to be solved? What's going on here? What do they think is going to be the outcome? Because you could have the best solution ever. And if we don't know what's driving it, what is that catalyst? If we don't take the time to ask why, we might completely miss the mark. So it's really important to ask why. And the same is true when we're looking at how we go through innovation. Like, why would I approach it this way or that way? Why would this make a difference? There's a lot of whys that need to be asked. We tend to be more tactical and just do the what's. Here's what I'm going to do. And we don't really go into the why factor. When you start to ask the question why, and you add that to strategically what you do every single week, like every single day, I try to make sure I take time to think back about the whys of what's going on. I try to get ahead and be proactive. This is a strategic choice in my life on how to think and how to act. And as a result, I've been tremendously successful because I've found that most people are like firefighters. They get called out, they put out the fire. They're doing 100% reactive, and they're driven by however many fires happen that day. And sometimes they get overwhelmed. But a real firefighter, the person that's actually planning and designing, what are they doing in the wintertime? They're proactively building burn piles, and they're getting rid of the fuel. They're educating the people around them and all that. So you have to ask yourself if you're going to be strategic in how you go through this and manage it at that level in your life and the way you're going to move forward on your hopes and dreams, or if you're just going to be reactive like everybody else.
So what I've just heard you say is we have a choice. We can either be reactive and not be successful, or we can choose to be successful and be proactive and think long-term strategically, constantly. It's like, what are the consequences, and ask why. It's like, if I ask myself, what's my purpose with literally everything I do, then I wind up understanding both myself, and then the actions are coherent.
Yeah. Well, in your definition of success, so I believe that people can show up to work all day long and be reactionary and work in largely tactical, low-level jobs. or entry in low-level to mid-level management jobs and be reasonably successful in the business world. But if we put it in the context of being a leadership visionary, you will never be successful if all you're doing is being reactive. It's impossible. You have to be strategic, and you have to surround yourself with other people. I'll put a little quote in from my mom. My mom told me at a very young age, son, it's hard to fly like an eagle when you're surrounded by turkeys. And my mom was right about that.
Yep.
My mother is one of the most renowned doll artists in the world. She passed away 3 years ago. And she did an amazing job of leading her industry and leading others. Well, how did she do that? She surrounded herself with some amazing people. She had vision and she saw it through, and she took the time to think about it every day to move that needle forward in a visionary way. And people just naturally gravitate to that. They start to get it. They tell their story. And the next thing you know, you have a community of people that make it happen.
Takes a community.
Mm-hmm. It's a village. It's not just the one. So like even with like Elon Musk in our current day, a lot of people would say, look at him, you know, but Elon is not alone. I got a cousin who runs Qualcomm, and he is a major part of that other form of leadership that you were talking about. You know, Elon Musk can innovate it and put a bunch of satellites up there, but somebody else has to integrate it into all of our other communications and IoT and all of that. And Qualcomm is doing a massive part of that infrastructure for all of the world. So again, thousands of people in these two different companies, and that's just the tip of the iceberg on what will make it actually real. Look at all the automobile companies that will have to then have solutions, and all the developers that go into those smart cars. It's a village.
Absolutely. When we just, the tip of the iceberg obviously is the vision that shows up in those moments, and we stitch them together and make them happen. I like that. Ken.
Yeah, we often have a lot of great ideas, but not every idea works. Look at Thomas Edison, right? He was the expert at proving 1,000 times what didn't work before he finally invented the light bulb. And I love that, because when I teach people to go into, like when I worked in a redacted space, we were always dealing with the threat of the unknown, something that had never been seen. How do you detect the unknown? You know, that's actually complicated, but there's an analytical tradecraft, and there are tools, tactics, and procedures that one can employ. And you can go after that, and you can actually do that. But that's not something common to the way that people think. They have to be led, they have to have a vision, and they have to have somebody to guide them down that path. And somebody had to figure that out in the first place and start to gain traction and then refine it. You mentioned how you've, you know, extensively reworked some of your best work, right? The same is true there. As you're a visionary, you need to be able to continually refine it and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and be willing to fail quickly if you're going to fail. And when you do succeed, to champion it as much as you can.
Another thing I like to say is we're constantly learning. How many humans do we know that don't walk because they were too lazy to learn? I have never, right? I've never heard of any, right? Some people think it's all genetic. There's a piece of each individual in them learning how, that persistence and commitment. So if we all had that level of commitment and this is the outcome, all those tall people around me are walking around, I'm going to do that. It looks way easier, right? That whole ambition and action sort of thing. So it's not if we have that, it's every one of us has it in us. We just have to pull it together and pull it back up and commit to it again. I like that.
We have it at different levels, some 10, some 50, some 100, but it does happen with intentionality. That's a very big part of what defines my life. I've made a choice strategically and intentionally to do X, Y, Z, personally and professionally. And that's one of the reasons why I've been successful. And that's what I teach people that are around me to do the same, is that you need to be intentional. And as you do that, and as you work in that team environment that I've discussed, you will naturally be educated and uptrained by the people that you respect that are around you as well. I remember when I worked on a golf course years ago, and I was just a groundskeeper guy, but I'd go around and golf with the pros because we're just hanging out and doing whatever. And they're like, hey, Ken, take the 7-iron, stiffen your arm up, do this. And doink, ball goes in the hole. I'm like, you guys are awesome. What was happening? These guys were leaders, and they were showing me the way, and I just had to listen.
They were willing to teach. I love that.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for your time and your insights today, Ken. I appreciate it a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you, Brad.
Well, your articulations have been pretty great. I like that a lot. So to wrap this up, thank you for being on the Visionary Leaders Mind podcast. For our listeners, mine, at least at the moment, remember to keep pursuing your dreams and learning so you can guide this world with your insights, epiphanies, and hidden brilliance, because we need your Visionary Leaders Mind.
Thank you, Brad.